3, 2, 1. Well, here we are, folks. You just saw Corey Olds there disappearing off frame. For folks that aren't cave divers and haven't seen this before, we're currently in the Crazy Czech Room. So this was a room discovered by a couple of Czech doctors in the early 2000s. It is an absolutely enormous room at the far end of Pines Cave, and people have been checking this out for quite some time. They've been trying to find a way on. It's roughly 200 metres into the cave. It's quite complicated and difficult to actually get there in the first place. It involves navigating through a series of tunnels down to about 34 metres. The big discovery in the early 2000s was essentially a jump across to this little hole, and it led down to a tunnel, and that tunnel runs for roughly 60 to 70 metres and then goes up into this enormous Crazy Czech Room. And the argument was you had to be kind of crazy to be there. That's one of the stage cylinders we use. We breathe from that stage cylinder in order to get to the room in the first place. And here we are just dropping down into essentially what we would call a lead. So it's a small little section where there might potentially be a way off to another tunnel. Bit of selfie stick footage of me here, swinging around, my soggy wombat sticker there on the helmet. And the big discovery, I suppose, here is what we're calling the Gaddy Gap. So in cave diving, we regularly have restrictions that we then have to navigate through, and sometimes they're quite long, sometimes they're quite small, and in this case, this one was particularly squeezy. A little gap for us to squeeze through, but it was actually identifying this that led to what we now call the Crazy Wombat Tunnel. So finding a way through the Gaddy Gap, and actually finding the Gaddy Gap in the first place, allowed us to discover there was a tiny little bit of water flowing through that space. I brushed a rock and the silt essentially came straight back towards me, telling me that there was water moving through and that there would potentially be a way through the rock pile. So there's quite a large rock pile at the back of the Crazy Czech Room, and the ducking and weaving that you're watching me do at the moment is essentially moving in amongst the rocks that are stacked almost like a jigsaw puzzle. And I'm wiggling my way through those rocks, trying to find a way out to the other side. So when we're doing things like this, we don't like diving through rock piles. It's quite scary, to be honest with you. You are essentially squeezing and wiggling between rocks that are stacked on top of each other, so it can be a little bit disconcerting. But what we're doing is trying to find a way to open passage, open tunnel, and if we can find a way through that rock pile. And in this case, we found the way out of the rock pile in another restriction that I'm just dropping down into at the moment. So it's a little bit hard to tell, but I'm actually fully vertical at the moment. And where I'm looking right now is a second restriction called the Beaver Hole. And when I first spotted this, there was actually a rock blocking where I'm squeezing through at the moment. And I was shining a light around and I saw a shadow behind a rock, and it made me realise that it wasn't a continuous wall. There was actually something behind it, so moved the rock out of the way and got very excited when I started to see the brown walls that we're looking at the moment. It's usually a good sign that we're into what we call phreatic passage, and it means that it's essentially been an underground river. The white that you can see on those walls is where we've essentially bumped it. The walls are quite soft and fragile. And as we pop out of the rock pile, we get into what we're now calling the void. Now, you're very lucky seeing the footage of the void as it is right now, because this particular room gets silted out very, very easily. I'm looking at the footage at the moment. I don't think, other than this one time that we filmed it, I don't think I've ever seen the void as clear as it is in this video. Generally, it's quite swampy. We're fairly certain that there's flow moving through this room, but the flow is running across the roof. And so rather than clearing the area down the bottom and clearing around the rocks, well, you can see the quite thick silt on the bottom there, and essentially it just hangs there. So you wind up with this layer of silt that essentially hangs there, and as I said, it looks a bit like a swamp, like a mist above the ground. The sound that you might be able to hear in the background there is one of my low pressure inflators. just clicked on a rock and it started to hiss a little bit, and I think I've just turned it back off again. But this was quite exciting. When we first found the void, we knew that we were onto something very exciting. This is me spinning back to have a look there to make sure that Corey is following along safely behind me. And the really exciting thing for us is what you're about to see now. So moving out of the void, this milky, quite dark, strange room, ascending slightly, moving up from about 29 metres up to the rock that is just ahead, sitting at about 27. And in a second, we're going to turn, we're going to look up to the right. Off to the left-hand side is a section that we've named the Pagey Pocket, named after a friend who passed on not that long ago, David Page. We decided to name a section of the cave after him, so we're looking very close to the Pagey Pocket now. So that's that section up, top left-hand corner of the frame at the moment is what we refer to as the Pagey Pocket. It's quite, so center of the screen right now is the Pagey Pocket. There's two ways into it. There's at the top there, and there's another section down low where I'm looking at the moment. It's quite a nasty piece of cave, if I'm honest. We wanted to name something special after Dave, and so we did, but it's not a part of the cave that we want too many people going into because it's quite scary in there. What's more exciting, I suppose, is the Crazy Wombat Tunnel, which is what we're essentially looking at now. So Corey and I are popping out. He's having a quick look at the Pagey Pocket. But up ahead of us is this absolutely enormous tunnel. So from the rocks on the floor to the ceiling that we're looking up towards at the moment, there's a roughly 10 to 12 metres distance between the two. The room itself is about 15 to 20 metres wide. It varies, obviously. And this main section that we're in at the moment is roughly 50 metres long, but it does go on further. It tightens up a little bit further ahead. But swimming into, as you can see, quite a large, almost gallery shaped. So there's a few leads on the different sides, on the left and right hand side, that we still would like to poke into and have a look at. But the first time I popped out into what we now call the Crazy Wombat Tunnel was very exciting. Well, to be honest with you, it's very exciting if we find anything in a cave. But yeah, to find something as tall, as wide, as impressive as this was, the video doesn't really do it proper justice. Now, it looks like we've gotten to the end of the tunnel here, and this is a classic thing with cave exploration, is you always make sure you go all the way to the end and touch the wall, because, sure enough, there can be another tunnel hiding behind a rock. And this is essentially a continuation of the Crazy Wombat Tunnel. It is much smaller, so this section we're heading into now is roughly 7 metres wide, and there's only 2.5, maybe 3 metres between the rocks on the floor and the ceiling. This is only a fairly short section that tightens up before it opens back up again. On the left of the screen now, it's just as it's disappearing, there's actually a rock there that's essentially suspended. It's trapped up in the roof. So we try and avoid bumping into things like that. But as we look up here, we're currently at about 24, 25 metres. There's quite a substantial tunnel on the right-hand side, on the right of the frame at the moment. And as we look up, there's a dark area there, and that's what we now call Gnome Home. That's all the way back up at 15 metres. So this is quite a complicated dive to get to, mainly because of the distances and the way that things go. But there you have it, folks. That is the Crazy Wombat Tunnel.